Howdy. Today, I want to talk a little about something I mentioned in, I think it was yesterday's video. We're talking, reading the Dhammapada, and we came across some references to refuge. Refuge, the idea of refuge within Buddhism. And I mentioned that my current understanding of refuge differs somewhat. Well, it doesn't differ. The ideas behind the words are the same, but the use of the words is different, and I wanted to discuss the use of how I use the word refuge and how Buddhism used the words refuge, and how we somewhat diverge while still pointing to the same meaning. The phrase I'm currently infatuated with is, there is no refuge in this world. Ever since I got back from the retreat, or midway through the retreat when this phrase entered my head, I've not been able to get rid of it, by which I mean I can't get rid of the intense meaning behind it and the sentiment that holds for me at the moment. That's something that I can't get rid of at the moment because it's pointing out something very important to me. So what do I mean there is no refuge? There is no refuge in the sense that there is no escape from pain and suffering in this world, in the broadest sense. And when I use the term refuge, I mean it in the sense of, well, not permanent, but in a way in which we think it will be permanent. Like we seek a refuge hoping that it will protect us from the storm of life, the pains and sufferings of life. But that is in a sense turning away from reality, because the reality of life seems to be that suffering and pain are inexplicitly, that you can't remove them from the experience of life. And that consciousness, being awake, having a human, even animal intelligence, we are bound to suffer and bound to pain. Not in every moment, but the escape from any future pain and future suffering is impossible. That is the refuge I feel I and a lot of us have been and continue to, and a lot of us also seek refuge in that sense by planning into the future a world in which we will no longer suffer. Or at least in which our suffering will subside. Now, this is not to say that if we're in a tremendous situation of suffering, more suffering than we usually are, to say that will never end. But to say that suffering will come to an absolute end, that we will never have to worry about pain or anything like that in the future, that does not exist. That refuge does not exist. There is no refuge from pain and suffering in the future. So that's the first, I guess, step to kind of explaining what I wanted to get across. The reason why it seems so important to me is, well, I guess I just said it, precisely because I've come to realize that possibly my entire life up until recently, my whole quarter century of years has been lived in a sense seeking refuge in the future, by which I mean entering my thoughts, using my mind to create a future in which I will not suffer, or that I will be surrounded by pleasure to the extent I won't ever have to face the negativities of the world. And that was a delusion. That was an absolute delusion. and this is an interesting point, I think the effort I went into trying to remove my future world from suffering, let me rephrase that. The more effort I put into trying to make a future for myself in which I didn't suffer, the more I actually suffered. Interestingly. And I'm only reflecting on this on the past couple of weeks, obviously, so we've still got a lot of time to really think about this. Or maybe we don't. I might die before this video ends. We don't know! But if you're watching this now, I've survived. I might be dead out there, but I made it through the video. Now, I forgot what the hell I was saying. Oh, yes. So, yeah, the more I entered into my mind and attempted to create this world in the future in which I would not have to suffer, the more I was pulled from the reality of this moment. And it's becoming evident to me that the reality of this moment, each moment right now, that is where pain and suffering comes to crucify you. Now, I will explain that use of the word as well, because I don't actually mean it negatively. What I mean is that pain and suffering has a cause. It's a condition. Life is one of its conditions, but there are also other conditions in which life is the totality of the condition, but the actual parts of the conditions we are largely unaware of. And in order to become aware of what causes our pain, we need to be in the present moment with our pain and our suffering. Because it's only when we can it's only when we can feel our pain. Beyond words, ultimately. But words will be a tool to understand our pain, obviously. But it's only when we can feel our pain truthfully and without trying to run from it. Don't run. Sorry, we just the computer cut off because I had no space left, but I've rectified that and I'll continue on from where I was just going. I just said that we cannot run from the pain. Don't run. And when we finally cease that action of trying to escape the apparent personal suffering and pain that we feel, then are we capable, more so than ever, if perhaps only then are we capable of seeing the intricate puzzle pieces that are the causes and condition that made up that pain, and we can see how we can not identify with it. This I think is the main difference between how I'm using the word refuge and how we've come across it in the Dhammapada. Pain and suffering are inevitable. That's the first noble truth of Buddhism. So we're not in opposition there. This world, discontentment is synonymous with existence. However, the mind, the lens through which we perceive the world, has the ability to make our pain into something in which we suffer over more than necessary. It does this by identifying, I'll use these two words synonymous. We identify with that suffering as something that we don't want. We attach to the not liking pain because we've come to conceptualize our conceptualization, the human conceptualization of pain and suffering is wholly negative. We don't have appreciation for pain and suffering. However, if we were to look not even that deeply into things, we would see that the pain and suffering of our life has indeed led us to great wisdom, compassion for others. Say when we've gone through suffering and we see others going through that same suffering, we can feel for them and we can care for them to a greater extent than we would have if we had not personally felt that pain also. There is innumerable qualities of which pain and suffering endow upon us that we as a society don't recognize. I don't know any place other than Buddhism, looking out into the world of society and the ways of living, where pain and suffering are seen without negative connotation, are seen clearly as a condition of life that also can bear good fruit. That's what I want to stress as well. Suffering does not necessarily bear negative fruit. That's our preconception of suffering as negative. If we conceive of suffering as negative and then we go on to induce more suffering in ourselves, that will bring us disgusting fruit. But if we can see suffering as it is and embrace it, well, then that will bring us beautiful fruit. And that seems to be the misconception I've had and the world at large seems to have with pain, suffering, disease, death. All of these things bring us a sublime quality, which if we had not, life would be, dare I say, meaningless and boring. And this goes into what I was saying about seeking refuge in the future. My seeking refuge in the future, seeking for a place without pain and suffering, an ultimate release from that, caused me more pain and suffering because I was not seeing the reality of the conditions I was in this moment. I feel like I had something more to say on that point, but my mind has kind of left me in a blank right now. But yes, let's digress back to there is no refuge. So when I say there is no refuge in this world, I mean to say there is no place that we can conceptualize for ourselves with our mind in the future in which we will never suffer or never have pain again. This is a delusion that we must discard if we are ever to face pain and suffering as it is. Because to conceptualize a future, to seek a future without pain and suffering, implies that we are conceptualizing pain and suffering as negative, as something we do not want. And if we can come, as we've just mentioned, to see the positive qualities that come alongside the negative qualities that fill the whole space in between the poles of negative and positive, the entire grey space. Shout out Sloth Boy motherfucker if you're watching this. If we can see the real tangential actual qualities of pain and suffering, that which exists between good and evil, that which actually is the reality of the thing, inseparable from our lives, then perhaps we can ease up on the gas pedal trying to run away from it. When we can see that there is no refuge, and to seek refuge, by which we've established meaning seek a life without pain and suffering, if we can see that as meaningless and futile, then maybe we could have who knows what type of world we could have, you know? I'm not necessarily against the world we have now, but I know we could do a lot we could have a lot more interesting of a place, a lot more of a connected of a world, a lot more communication, a lot less war. And I say that hesitantly because obviously war brings a great amount of pain and suffering. And I've often contemplated, perhaps wars happen to push society and our thinking forward, because without that pain and suffering, we can't grow. I'll tell just a tiny simile quickly that comes from Ajahn Brahm. He's the head monk at the monastery the Buddhist society I attend. He led the retreat I was at recently. Simile of stepping in dog poo. Stepping in dog poo. Do we enjoy this? Generally, we don't like to step in dog poo. Sorry about that. Distractions. Generally, we don't like to step in dog poo, eh? But what would be better to do, as Ajahn Brahm says it, is instead of just wiping dog poo off if ever we step on it on the side of the road or anything like that, we should actually take that dog poo home with us. We should take that poo home and go to our garden, or even if we just have one plant, scrape the dog poo onto the plant, and that's the best fertilizer you can get. If that plant has fruits, then next time it fruits, they'll be more delicious than ever, because you smothered that motherfucker in shit. Okay? Now, what the fuck does this mean? Well, we don't usually like to step in shit. And similarly, we don't usually like to suffer. But if we could see our suffering as something of utility, that in the chain of causes and effects can bring great goodness with time and wise action, then we may not seek refuge from pain and suffering. Because why would we want to seek refuge from that which makes our garden grow so beautifully? To seek refuge from the pain and the suffering of this world is to ultimately seek refuge from the beauty of this world. Why would we do that? There is no refuge in this world. It takes a while to accept that, I suppose. Because while we still believe there could be an escape from pain and suffering, the negative conceptualization of it, then we're not going to stop believing that until we have phenomenological point of view experience of phenomena that says otherwise, that gets us to realize that the pain and suffering of our lives, if we could scrape that off into our heart and our soul, in the analogy of the dog poo, then that would grow our heart and our mind and our awareness of reality so much. It would grow it. It would grow it so much. So let me just quickly, I'll sum up by contrasting what it said in here yesterday about refuge. If I can find it. Here we go, yeah. So we first mention it in the section called the Buddha. Quite apt. It says, men in their fear fly for refuge to mountains or forests, groves, sacred trees. Last cut, I swear. My computer keeps running out of space. I was just quickly reading you how refuge is referenced in section the Buddha from the Dhammapada. Men in their fear Fly for refuge to mountains or forests, groves, sacred trees, and shrines. But those are not safe refuge. They are not the refuge that frees a man from sorrow. He who goes for refuge to the Buddha, to truth, and to those whom he taught, he goes to a great refuge. Then he can see the four great truths, which we went on to. It's the Four Noble Truths that end in the Eightfold Noble Path. It's the whole methodology of Buddhism. But we're not worrying about that. I'm interested in the use of refuge. It says here that mountains, forests, groves, sacred trees, these places within the world which we can conceptualize of, these places are not true refuge. There is no escape from sorrow. Another word for suffering, pain. There is no escape from that within the world. However, it points to taking refuge in the truth, that which was spoken by the Buddha, the Buddhas of eternity, holy people, Jesus, Muhammad, whoever you want to reference, Krishna, whatever. The Buddhas of the world, those enlightened beings, if we take refuge in their truth, then that is a great refuge, it says. Now, what does this mean? To me, it ultimately means the same thing, but it has I suppose a connotation which I fell into a trap of, and which I'm wary of, now that I realize it. By which I mean, and I'll explain. To think that taking refuge in the truth of the Buddha, the Sangha, the Dharma, to think that taking refuge in any of these high spiritual, religious things could be also our path from sorrow, I think that is a bit of a tentative, I don't know about that. Because we don't escape our pain and suffering. Ultimately, we come to be able to face it and use it correctly. But to be free from it would be like cutting off a limb. It would severely... We need it. More than we need a limb. So I just feel like there's possible interpretations when we say that taking refuge in any higher religious truth can free us from sorrow. There's much room for misinterpretation, because 99% of the world interprets religious truths as things they can conceptualize. By which I mean, they think they know what the truth is. But the truth can't be known. The truth is beyond relative understanding. The truth, ultimate truth, is divine truth, divinity. And divinity is that which is not... We do not have personal relation with divinity while we exist within the relative world. The ego, the persona that we are, cannot interact with the divine. We can only interact with the divine when we empty ourselves of persona, of ego, of conception, of perception, of everything. The relationship with the divine arises out of being empty, out of being silence, out of pure awareness without conceptualization. And to claim that taking refuge in the truth, again, it's not false, but the connotation is that if we could find the truth, then we would be free from suffering. And we can never find the truth because we don't find the truth. We empty ourselves of ourselves and the truth appears clear right in front. No. I can't even say that because that would be misconceptualizing the truth. There is no in front. There is no behind. When the truth is present, all is the truth. It's not in front or behind anything. You aren't there with the truth. When you witness the truth, again, that's a bad sentence, but the truth is as much you as it is the truth. The truth is divinity. It is that which cannot be that is not separate from the world, that is the world, that encapsulates all, and that we cannot come into relationship with, because we only come into relationship with that which is also relative in nature. And all things that are relative in nature are just that which can be conceptualized, that which comes and goes. Relative things come and go. Divinity stands unborn and undying. And to say that we could take refuge in that is it's just a tricky sentence. It's a tricky way of thinking about things. And I worry about people thinking that they've found the truth in a few sentences and investing so much in that they think they can find refuge from the pain and suffering of this world. Because we don't want refuge from the pain and suffering of this world. We really don't. Once we come to see our pain and what it has to offer us, then we'll be sorry that we ever wished it away. We'll thank pain. Thank you, pain. Thank you for entering my life. Thank you for entering all of our lives, suffering and pain, for teaching us the reality of the world and how to face the world and how to act wholly. Not Hoyly. WHOLE. Whole. Without hiding from parts of ourselves. Without compartmentalizing our fear and running from it. If we could see suffering as something we need not seek refuge from, then it would become obvious there is no refuge in this world. And we would not even seek such a refuge. Not in religion, not in anything. So yeah, to say that I have a different conceptualization of refuge to what is spoken of in here is not even entirely right. It's just a kind of cautious mind I have about the use of that word and the connotations it has, particularly when we're saying we can seek refuge in the truth that will free us from sorrow. It sounds great, but that's a bit of a refuge in itself. And it's definitely not a refuge in the truth if that's what your refuge is. Just seeking escape from pain. Anyway, I've talked too much. I hope you have a lot of pain, and I hope you shovel it into your heart and become the next motherfucking Buddha, because I'm waiting. I want to see a Buddha. Can you be the next Buddha? Because I would really like to witness that. Alright, I think I spoke for about probably 25 minutes. I need to cut these videos together. And I'll see you soon. I love you guys so much. There is no refuge in this world. I put it here as well. You can probably see it. Oh, no, you can't. Bad angle, but... Oh, there you go. There is no refuge in this world. You see, I'm attached to it still. I'm identifying with it. I'm not a Buddha. And I'm not claiming to be, motherfucker. I love you. Thank you for always... Thank you always. Thank you. I love you.